honest with y'all, we might have to get Sydney Colson up out of here. In terms of her being on the Indiana Fever, it might be time for her to go, bro. I'm gonna keep it real. Like, she's kind of hanging on by a thread. Like, she's a friend.
Sydney Colson went on Yahoo Sports and said a few things she probably should have kept to herself. She took direct shots at the Indiana Fever, criticized the entire CBA process, and even encouraged younger players to hold the line. Now, the internet is on fire, and the reactions are coming in fast. What started as a casual interview has turned into a full-blown controversy, and trust me, this conversation is about to get very interesting.
Sydney Colson was on Yahoo Sports addressing his WNBA CBA, man, and I'm just tired of these people at this point. I'm tired of it. Y'all either gonna sign a deal or y'all not. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? Let's stop playing games, man. Let's stop playing games, man. Owners not giving y'all, they're not falling into $400 and $700 million in debt because of y'all no more. Like what y'all gonna do?
Before we get into it, let me ask you this. Do you think players like Sydney Colson, who are on the fringe of the league, should be the loudest voices in CBA negotiations? Drop your honest opinion in the comments right now. Let's see what you really think.
Wait, real with y'all. We got Sydney Colson addressing the CBA and basically kind of like urging a strike. Like, yeah, don't sign that. Don't just sign. Let's just make sure the younger players know and this and that. Like, bro, what are you doing, bro? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? This is crazy, man. These chicks.
Let's be upfront about who we're talking about here. Sydney Colson is a veteran WNBA player. She's been in the league a long time. She's bounced around rosters, survived cuts, battled injuries, and lived through multiple CBA cycles. And by her own admission, her words, not anyone else's, she's been hanging on by a thread for years. That's not shade. That's exactly what she said on camera on Yahoo Sports. I've been hanging on by a thread in the W for years now. So with that established, let's talk about what she decided to do with whatever platform she still has. Because instead of quietly staying in her lane and hoping the Indiana Fever bring her back, Colson went on camera and urged players to hold the line on the CBA. She positioned herself as a voice for the middle tier. She talked about empowering young players. She described sitting in rooms for hours, educating rookies on the details of the CBA. She named players who she believes were pushed out of the league. She turned it into a whole movement. And naturally, the internet had a lot to say about it.
Yeah, man. And then they make it like, oh, y'all just don't want to see women get paid. No, we cool with seeing women get paid. Y'all just aren't crediting the person that's responsible for y'all trying to get all this money. And on top of that, y'all want everybody to ignore the fact that y'all have caused these owners to lose money for 30 plus years straight. That don't matter if you a male, female, it don't matter, brother.
Now look, the WNBA CBA situation is real. Concerns about player compensation are real. The history of the league finishing seasons in the red is real. Nobody is pretending these are made-up problems. But there's a very specific question worth asking here. When you are a fringe player, by your own words, coming off a significant injury and fighting to hold onto a roster spot that is far from guaranteed, is Yahoo Sports really the place to be loudly positioning yourself as the face of labor resistance? Because here's the reality about being outspoken in CBA negotiations when your own contract situation is uncertain. You are essentially telling the teams that might sign you that you could be a complication. You're signaling that you come with an agenda. And in a league where roster spots are extremely limited, where every decision is calculated, and where teams are acutely aware of which players add value versus which players add noise, that's a risky move. A very risky calculation. Sydney Colson chose to make that calculation publicly. And now, we're here.
Be doing stuff, but you can't really predict if that stuff will happen, really.
Yeah, and I know that you've got so many exciting, fun plans for the future for UNTP on the entertainment side of things. But in the short-term future, you know, there is no CBA yet. You don't know where you're going to be playing in 2026. You don't even know if you're going to be playing in 2026. What is in that mindset that you are in right now with so many things that are up in the air?
You know, I'm a person, I've lived my life on just like faith and trusting that what's meant for me is going to happen. I don't have a reporter asked me not long ago, like, are you stressed? What's your level of stress regarding the CBA? And I'm like, look, I've been hanging on by a thread in the W for years now. I thought it was over after the pandemic, after the bubble season. So I've been fortunate and blessed to be around this long. Like, I think I just want to see the players fight for, what we feel we've earned and what we deserve at this point. And hopefully, an agreement is on the way soon. Cause I know, like, we want to play. People want to see us play. But I think you can't fault people. And I think that if our league didn't look the way we did, a lot of things, like a lot wouldn't be said about us fighting for what we feel we deserve. But I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to women, people just don't think that we should be saying that we deserve something. And so I want to see our young players in this league, the people who've been around and, help get the league to where it is.
Now let's talk about what she actually said, because the content matters just as much as the context. She talked about wanting players to fight for what they feel they've earned. Fine. Reasonable. Most people would agree with that in principle. She talked about making sure younger players understand the CBA process so they can make informed decisions, also reasonable on its face. She described the energy in the room when Terry Jackson and Nika Owiki came to Athletes Unlimited to brief the players, saying it was helpful, informative, and empowering. Players walked away feeling more knowledgeable. All of that sounds good, until you zoom out and look at the full picture. Because Colson also made one comment that completely stopped the conversation in its tracks. She said, and this is the part that really set things off, that if the league didn't look the way it does, a lot of the criticism about players fighting for what they deserve wouldn't exist. And when she was pushed to explain what she meant, she leaned into the idea that people simply don't want women saying they deserve more. That's where a lot of people slam the brakes. Because framing criticism of WNBA CBA demands as rooted in people not wanting women to be paid is one of the most frustrating arguments in this entire debate. Not because women don't deserve fair pay, they absolutely do. Not because WNBA players haven't contributed to the league, they absolutely have. But because it completely sidesteps the financial reality. The WNBA has been losing money for over 30 years. 30 years. That's not a rumor. That's not internet chatter. That's documented business reality. Owners have absorbed losses year after year because they believe in the long-term potential of the product. At some point, blaming concerns about that financial reality on gender bias stops being an argument and starts becoming a deflection. Nobody pointing at the red ink is doing it because they don't want women to get paid. They're doing it because businesses that consistently lose money eventually stop operating. And if the league stops operating, nobody gets paid. That's not political. That's not ideological. That's arithmetic. Now here's the part that's genuinely hard to ignore. In the very same interview, Colson acknowledged that she's been lucky to still be in the league. She admitted that after the pandemic bubble season, she thought her career was over. She openly described herself as a fringe player. And then, in the very next breath, she positioned herself as a spokesperson for what players deserve, urged others to hold firm, and took a public stance that could easily make teams think twice about signing her. That's a fascinating sequence of decisions. And this is where the Indiana Fever angle really matters. Colson was on the Fever roster. And if you've been anywhere near women's basketball over the past year, you know the Fever are the most talked about team in the league, not because of Sydney Colson, but because of Caitlin Clark. Clark drove viewership and attendance numbers in 2024 that the league had never seen before. She turned the Indiana Fever into the most commercially relevant team in franchise history. And while Colson didn't name her directly, the implication was clear when she talked about player value, compensation, and what people deserve. Fans immediately pushed back. You didn't start doing numbers like this until 2024. We all know why. Now, let's be fair. Caitlin Clark's arrival doesn't mean every other player in the league is suddenly irrelevant or untalented. There are elite players in the WNBA. Nobody serious disputes that. But there is a difference between acknowledging talent and pretending the league's commercial explosion had nothing to do with one specific player who brought an entirely new audience to the sport. That audience didn't show up because of a collective bargaining debate. They showed up because of one name. And the financial leverage players now have in CBA negotiations exists largely because of that commercial foundation. Ignoring that isn't principled labor advocacy, it's selective memory. Colson also raised the middle-tier issue, and that part deserves real attention. She talked about how the previous CBA helped top earners and rookies, but squeezed middle-tier veterans. Some solid players lost jobs over salary differences that came down to a few $1,000s. That's a real structural problem. If the middle of your talent pool collapses, the entire league suffers. That concern is legitimate. But then she crossed into different territory. She named individual players, specifically mentioning Katie Lou Samuelson collecting checks while no longer being able to play. And that instantly changed the energy. Because calling out individual players by name while positioning yourself as someone fighting for collective fairness is a contradiction people noticed immediately. And once that line was crossed, the conversation shifted from labor advocacy to personal grievance. You can't talk about empowering and protecting players in one sentence and then call out a specific player's contract in the next. That's not solidarity. That's a grievance wearing the costume of solidarity. Now, the 2-hour session with younger players at Athletes Unlimited, that part actually sounds useful. Young players entering a professional league deserve to understand what they're signing. They deserve to know how CBA structures impact their careers. Veteran players passing down institutional knowledge isn't wrong. But there's a line between education and recruitment into a specific negotiating position. And the way Colson described that session, emphasizing the need to make younger players feel empowered, sounded a lot less like neutral education and a lot more like organizing. Which, to be clear, is her right. But let's call it what it is. The bigger issue here is timing and positioning. Colson herself admitted that when all is said and done, one side may feel like they gave up more than they wanted, but the deal will still be respectable. That's actually a reasonable take. That's how negotiations work. Both sides give. Neither side gets everything. A deal gets done and life goes on. But that reasonable perspective was sandwiched between public posturing that painted a very specific image of Sydney Colson, a player who is vocal, who is organizing others, and who has strong opinions about how owners run their business. And that's where this becomes a problem. Because for a team like the Indiana Fever, a franchise laser-focused right now on building around Caitlin Clark and winning, the calculation is simple. Does adding Sydney Colson bring basketball value that outweighs the noise that comes with her? And considering Colson's own admission that she's hanging on by a thread, coming off injury, and fighting for a roster spot, the math isn't complicated. She essentially argued against her own signing. Not intentionally, but effectively. And the regret here isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the kind of regret that hits when you realize you spent energy making public arguments that ultimately cost you more than they gave you. The WNBA CBA will get resolved. A deal will happen. The season will start. Rosters will be finalized. And when those front offices sit in evaluation meetings, they won't be thinking about Yahoo Sports appearances. They'll be thinking about one thing: what does this player bring, and what does this player cost, not just in salary, but in everything else? Sydney Colson placed herself on the wrong side of that calculation. She had every right to speak her mind. But speaking your mind and speaking smart are two very different things. And now, the Indiana Fever have every right to speak their minds, too, with their roster decisions. If this made you think, hit that like button and subscribe. We keep it real around here, and we're just getting warmed up.